Hey girl,
Hey mama.
ready to get unschooled?
Totally.
Welcome to Moms Unschooled.
Where we break down all the things from the mundane to the magnificent, so you can think for yourself and do what's right for you.
Hey Erin.
Hey Sarah.
Welcome to Moms Unschooled, and we have a special guest who you know very well.
I do. My husband is here, Chris, my ultra hunky husband.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks for coming on, honey.
You're welcome. How's it going today, ladies?
Good. So what motivated you to want to come on Moms Unschooled today?
Well, my wife said, Chris, hey, come up with something. We want you to come on and talk. And I was just like, when? They're like, well, tomorrow. I said, what do you want me to talk about? I don't know. You need to come up with something. So, after some deliberation and you guys pestering, I came up with something. And so I think it's something that we want to typically discuss, and it's something I think as good parents you want to keep going after. But I want to talk today about saving curiosity. What I want to talk about is how do we save curiosity in our kids?
Love it.
Don't be a curiosity killer. So how we got to this and how I really thought about this one is yesterday we're in the store and my kids, like typical kids, they're playing with all the toys, throwing balls around. And then all of a sudden, from out of nowhere, this gentleman that worked at the store came up and we found out that we knew him. And so after like some hugs and some knuckle bumps and whatnot, the guy that was there that we knew wanted to give Jet a gift. So he works at the store and he gave him a box cutter. Right? So immediately, and then he gives Jet, our middle one, a box cutter. And then he looks to Dash and goes to give one to Dash, and he calls him the Destroyer. And he looks at Erin. He's like, hey, can I give Dash the Destroyer one as well? And she goes, no. That was matter distinct. I was a couple aisles away, but I heard that very clearly. So when we get back to the house, Erin and I hadn't even reached the doorway yet, and I hear that they were using the box cutter already. Well, I walk in and I find Jet cutting random paper on the table with the box cutter. And I look down and there's just cut lines all over the table. And so I take the box cutter from him, put it up on the shelf, and I say, hey, buddy, that's on timeout until we talk about how to use box cutter. So...
Okay, so you placed it in timeout. Were you angry at the time? You seem to not lose your cool very often.
No, I was totally chill. I just took it I wasn't upset. So Erin and I, we slightly differ on this.
Okay.
But I would like to think that everything our house is in a way disposable. So I don't want to have either furniture or stuff typically that if it gets broken, I'm upset or have to be upset. So I like to throw the football in the house with the kids. I don't mind when we get into a belligerent water fight in the tub and the whole bathroom is flooded with water.
Okay.
They actually did that last night and it's pretty ridiculous. I got a good video of it. Squirt guns, cups of water flying everywhere. Anyways, I mean, I'm not upset that they broke it. And I knew he wasn't trying to be destructive. He was curious on how do I use and employ this thing. I recently read a book. The title of it was Curious by Ian Leslie. And very early in the book, it talks about children and their curiosity. And essentially, how do we preserve that? And by no means are kind of like these comments like reflective of the whole narrative of the book, but just kind of my mental model and how that stimulated my thought. And I didn't read it, by the way. I listened to it, audiobook. The ways I can daydream at the same time. It gets down to some very neat concepts about how we can stimulate our kids to be lifelong curious people. Highly recommend this book as anybody that's a new parent or even a parent and you just need kind of a refresher. I always thought it was kind of silly to read the typical parenting books that, tell you how to change a diaper or when a kid needs to eat or why are they screaming in bed or, the typical one that you get of like, why doesn't my kid sleep? I think those kind of come intuitively with parenting. It's like, you just got to learn. I'm not sure you're going to learn all that from a book. I'm not sure you can gain information, but I find this one to be one is highly recommended. Is just the way kids think and really the tremendous effect you have on them early in their development.
Yes, because you're not just raising babies or children, you're raising humans. And I think people forget that along with that comes their ability for curiosity and other critical thinking skills.
Absolutely. And so I like to believe that I'm one of those individuals with my kids that I have no concern or issue when they ask me why or how. I mean, if even it's the simplest thing of, I asked for this, Daddy said this, why do I have to do that, Daddy? Well, I believe I owe them an explanation. Now, there are times it's like, right now we're going to do this. I will explain it to you. I don't have a time to explain it now.
Right.
So still do that thing, but I owe you, and it's my responsibility, but come back and explain it to you. So I'm not saying I'm perfect, but I think for the most part, if I can address it right there, I respect that they want to know why.
Yes.
And I think that's important, or how they can do something. And I think really that's a huge takeaway for me from the book. And so when it comes down to it, it's like, how do we foster the child's desire to explore and to be adventurous?
So give me an example of what's the difference between interacting with a kid and responding to a kid in a way that fosters their curiosity versus just kind of like figures it out for them and doesn't help them think about the world around them.
Yeah, so one of the example he gives in the book, a young toddler, and they're looking at a ball and they're pointing to it. And this is an example that can be applied to many different things. And there's a couple different choices as a parent or as the adult in there. Do I just simply give the child, like it points, I give, like they want it? Or are they more looking for a deeper explanation of what is that thing? How is it? Why is it there? What does it do? And explaining that. They're trying to gain a deeper understanding. And it's interesting. This is something they mentioned in the book, is like how that age from 3 to 5 is really developing. If that individual will have a monumental impact on them, how curious they are throughout their life is really, that is kind of deepening those roots in their mind to be a curious individual.
And as you're talking, that reminds me of some of the playground differences we've seen in the United States and Germany, for example. In the States, I know the key component is safety, right? So we're not necessarily encouraging them to take risks or be curious, whereas some playgrounds in other countries are set up more so to have them experiment with what will happen if I jump from here to here and XYZ. So what are some things on a daily basis that you think people need to get unschooled about that we're unintentionally blocking our own kids' curiosity or sense of curiosity?
Well, I think it's understanding, like, what's the difference between a puzzle and a mystery, right? Do they just want to know the analytical, I do this, this, and this, or do they want to be able to uncover it throughout the period? And I think that applies later on in life as well. So I would say the first and foremost we got to get unschooled is when your child asks you why, they're not trying to be rude or challenging you. And I think sometimes some parents feel that way. Mm-hmm. So, and heck, I think we can probably look in different scenarios in life where we've seen, whether it be in a store or maybe we've personally done it. I've probably been there before, right? Where frankly, I just didn't know why. And when a child's asking you that, and you're supposed to have the answer, and they're actually challenging you.
Yeah.
Right?
I love that example of in a store, though, because one thing I started to do, instead of just put it back or whatever, I said, you have to put that back where you got it, because someone worked really hard to take those all out of a box from the back to find a specific spot on the shelf. They labeled the shelf, blah, 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 blah. And I think it really clicked for my son that he was like, oh, okay. So now I understand that I'm being respectful of someone else's hard work versus just saying, put it back, put it back.
You're raising humans at that point.
Oh, look at me.
Yes. No, I appreciate that. I read where children from age 3 to 5, on an average, are going to ask an adult 40,000 questions. And most of them are going to be a why or how kind of question. And, like you said, they're not trying to be malicious or annoying. They generally want to know why. And we as the adults in their lives are their sounding board. They trust us with that question, and we are setting them up to ask questions, and they trust our answers. And so when I get annoyed about why is the moon round or why is the sky blue, and I don't have the exact answer, I need to slow down and be patient with the question. And either, I don't know, help them find the information or make it up into a story where we can go on a completely different tangent. But I love the questioning and how we need to take our time with it.
And I think that what that offers us to show to our children is a little bit of parent humility. Not always do we have the answer.
Absolutely.
Right? Not always do we know 100% the right way to do those things. We're going to give them our experiences, our thoughts, but it goes into an opportunity for us to learn alongside our kids and show parent humility. And I think in doing that, it shows them that through life, they need to be that lifelong learner. And then at no point will they know everything. They'll just never get there.
All the while creating honest and trusting relationships with the adults around them. I love that.
I think in our life right now, there is a kind of an information knowledge balance that we're trying to figure out. It's so compared to, our parents' generation, it's a lot easier to just pull information. And you almost have information overload. I think universally we have this conundrum that we're always in. For instance, do we give the kid the tablet or do we not give them the tablet? So one of the things that I know comes up in our household quite often, especially that we're doing the homeschool gig right now, one thing is our kids have a little personal dictionary. So when they have a word they need to learn, they ask mom or dad, they ask one of us to put it in there. But at the same time, there's been times that they ask Alexa how to spell the word. What we've tried to find is figure out a balance of how do we use technology, but don't allow it to totally enable and stop that, that knowledge growth aspect. One of the main points that Leslie talks about in the books is diversive curiosity versus epistemic curiosity. And diversive curiosity being kind of inherently what we're accustomed to when we look at any of the social media stuff, when we're on YouTube, on TikTok, and just popping from one, interesting thing to the other.
Okay, so that's called diversive
curiosity.
Okay.
You're just getting flooded with information, but it's really not diving you down to a deeper understanding of anything. It's just flooding you with information. Where epistemic curiosity is that drive for knowledge and understanding.
Gotcha.
So you take that thing that you're passionate about and you drive more deeply. And you're always wanting to understand something more about it. And so when it comes to technology, that's where I think it's an interesting blend. Because as parents, we were always like at first, hey, we're just not going to let them have those devices. We're going to wait till they're older. And now I'm at that point of there's so many opportunities with those devices. We'd be stifling that curiosity potentially. We just got to make sure we're encouraging appropriately along the way that they are gaining a deeper understanding of aspects that they want to and not just clicking and moving along and just looking at the information randomly.
Right. And I really do appreciate that because, when we were growing up in the olden days, you sat around the dinner table with the family and conversation ensued. So somebody's talking about their day at school and in their history class, they were talking about the 18th president. Well, who was the 18th president? You go around the family dinner table and no one can quite remember who the 18th president was, but man alive, it stirred up an interesting conversation. People were trying to recall how many presidents or the order of the presidents. Well, that president did that, but I remember that one was quoted as saying this. And the conversation just grew and grew and grew out of curiosity. Now we have these tablets with information at our hands, and they definitely have a place in our lives, definitely can create a sense of curiosity and help us with the information. But where does that fit in? If my daughter wants to do a project on London and I hand her a tablet, Well, she can talk about the history of it. She can talk about the theater that's going on right now, or the places that they could stay if we traveled there, the language or the royalty. It can go any sort of direction. And if she just wanted to start with London, that information overload can let her go on any sort of positive tangent to create a sense of wonder in that education. I'm all for that. But the social medias, the TikToks, they have their place as well. Those can almost stifle the curiosity.
Absolutely. And I just think we got to figure out ways to use them effectively and efficiently in ensuring. And again, this goes back to lifelong learning, curiosity. With that, the other big point is takeaway that I got out of this book is memorization. And so there are some arguments. I've read some other articles around this is what is the value of memorization? Because I think that it's interesting, and not that I'm an expert by no means in this, is kind of how we're doing. I'll use an example of Common Core math versus when we were kids, we learned our times tables, division tables, etc.
Through memorization.
Through memorization. And the argument is like that creates, the memorization actually is good because it creates and it keeps layering a foundation for our children. And we are better at remembering things also to keep in mind. It's difficult and challenging to learn. So as you keep building that memorization foundation, it allows for that launch point when your curiosity is stimulated to launch from versus having to do all that analytical puzzle type work. You actually have enough memorization where you can go and explore the mystery.
I like it. The memorization is necessary but not sufficient for curiosity. And if we're trying to make them analyze from the start, when do they even have time to be curious? Because they're probably also unsure about their own skills to ask different and new questions if they don't even really understand what they're being asked to do analytically starting off.
Right, the attention span is so small when they're in elementary school. And if you teach them what 7 times 7 is, but they have to make out 49 donuts instead of memorizing 7 times 7 is 49, they've already gotten to their attention capacity. How can they springboard off onto new creative tangents? And the memorization creates this solid base where we can springboard off into wherever curiosity takes us.
Yeah, we got to think is like our kids are young right now. And over the course of the next 10 years, I can only imagine the information that's going to be out there. There's just going to be such an increasing amount of information that we need to encourage our kids to grow and explore and want for a deeper knowledge base.
Right.
But in doing that, we have to also just encourage the memorization and not be so thrown off that that's going to maybe stifle them.
But not only that, encourage the exploration, encourage the mistakes. We have to find patience in ourselves to not scream when our kid's cutting the table with the box cutter. We have to be able to allow curiosity to take its course sometimes. Now, yes, I get it. Their safety matters. But, if the kids are out digging in the dirt for worms, why not let them do that? Yes, it's cold and it's wet and it's rainy and they're going to get dirty. First of all, they don't feel cold like we do, y'all. And second of all, that observation and exploration could just pivot into something huge due to that curiosity. It is our responsibility not to stifle it, and it starts early with school systems and sitting in desks. And it's already been proven statistically that as soon as they are school age, they start asking less questions.
Really?
It is up to us to keep spurring that on.
Yeah, because the alternative is just a bunch of robots. If you're just feeding people information to process it back out to you versus thinking critically or curiously, which is what everyone says we want people to be like, but are we really giving them opportunities to do that, or do we just want them to be able to process and regurgitate information in the end?
And that's, going back to the math analogy, it's really back to we are evolving out of a time that we need humans to do the repetition type jobs.
Absolutely. And we have been for a long time. And I think now people are just starting to realize that.
However, when you teach to a test in the school systems, that's not spurring on the curiosity that we need when they're employed adults.
Absolutely not.
So we're stifling this curiosity from the great minds that are going to move our world further along and progress at such an early age.
I completely agree with that. There's a huge kind of sense of opposition in the idea of sit down, listen, do your work, don't ask questions. But oh, by the way, when you're 40, we're managing this company where we need an innovation officer. Well, where do you think those people are going to come from? It's going to be that kid who asked too many questions in the class. That phrase, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. What are you doing to that squeaky wheel? Are you telling them stop, stop, stop? Or are you saying, that's interesting, I haven't thought about it that way? Because you can't have it both ways. There's an economic principle, rewarding B while hoping for A. You can't sit there and say you want these independent thinkers who think about things in new, different ways when you're teaching them there's only this one way. Common Core is a great example. This is the way how math works, and Common Core is veiled in the vein of, oh, well, we want them to understand the concepts. That I would question.
Not saying it's not valuable.
Right. Right.
Not saying that's not valuable at all. That understanding how it works is beautiful. But if they have to go through that process every time as a, i.e. 40-year-old, they're never going to have time to explore those mysteries that they want to explore.
Love it. I equate it to having to disassemble a watch and reassemble it to tell what time it is every time.
Sure.
That is basically what you're setting up people to do. Mm-hmm. And the human brain, I think, what is it? We only use like a certain percentage of our entire capacity anyway.
Mine's pretty low.
But you have to wonder, why is that? Are we setting up kids to be curious at all? Or just obedient?
Well, how about that? What can we do? And I pose it to you two ladies. How can we make sure we're doing right by our kids to foster their curiosity and their willingness to learn and gain knowledge and in a deeper understanding for something they see? How do we ensure they go after that specific?
Well, one is, like I said, one is not treating them like robots and assuming that they also have something to bring to the interaction or to the table. So one is asking open-ended questions of them. Why do you think that happened? What could you do differently next time? Did you like what happened? Instead of, here's the answer, memorize this, sit down, write it down, don't say anything else. So asking open-ended questions of your kids, I think putting them in situations where they get some authority in choosing what they want to try to do next. I will never forget. I was at one of those paint your own pottery things, and this poor kid, I think he was 3 or 4, he kept trying to want to paint it in his own way, and his mom kept batting his hand away saying, no, like the eye has to be this color. So I get your concern about not breaking stuff, not knocking over things. You know, I didn't say anything. The kid looked so dejected by the end of it that he was just ready to leave. Whereas the mom was like, we're painting this for grandma and grandpa. This snowman has these color eyes and this color sweater, and that's that. And meanwhile, my son made a horribly looking pumpkin that was not orange, but whatever. He just enjoyed doing it. And I'm not saying I set himself up for that stuff perfectly all the time, but I think there's many little small examples on a daily basis of, and maybe not to the extreme of, you guys handled the box cutter thing way better than I would have, because you can be curious, but I don't know. But to your point, you realized, okay, this is an opportunity. I need to teach him what a box cutter can be used for and what it can't, versus just punishing them and them not learning from the situation.
So I would like to offer a quick counter that you're painting the ornament situation. I think the importance is you have to find balance, because it's not saying that required to paint that thing a certain way is a bad thing. And there has to be some ability to listen.
Yes.
And because the other part of this is critical is culture and understanding your culture and how things work, right? Because again, it creates our baseline.
Right.
Right. So where I would say something we can do in our everyday lives is to not do everything for them. Find an opportunity to teach them rather than do for them. Even in the simplest thing, how to make a sandwich. hey, Mom, I'm hungry. Instead of getting them their food, show them what food they can have. Have them make their sandwich. Know that they create that, not that they are disconnected from you and you can't do stuff for them.
Right.
But help them create an independence around something that you can control and just keep broadening that bubble for them.
I like it. So you set the parameters, but they're free to try things out. Within those parameters, maybe they want to stack 3 pieces of bread together, whatever, as long as they know what resources they have and you guys are on board with the outcome and the limitations, that's fine to do.
I will say he's more of the laid back parent. And so coming from the more tightly wound parent's perspective on this, yes, I want them to explore and be curious about their surroundings. I'm a firm believer in them learning how to do things themselves. The thing I have to work on for us to go that direction is my patience and my comfortable complacency. Life is just easy if mom does it, right? Like, oh, we'll whip out a sandwich. Okay, fine. And you're fed. Moving on. What else needs to happen? You know, because mom's juggling 12 things at once. I have to be able to slow down, explain it to them, give them a chance to feel that self-worth and independence. And so that takes a lot of energy out of me as a stay-at-home mom. I'm with them quite a bit. I have to slow down and give them the time and the resources to make this happen.
Absolutely. It's much easier to say, because that's not how we do it, or whatever.
Right.
Than
Oh,
it is
you're
to
fed.
explain to them. Absolutely.
Chris is the dad who's going to let them try to cut their own hamburger bun with the knife, and you know, you pull it out this and make sure you put the meat back in a container to keep it fresh. I'm going to fix that sandwich real fast. Instead of giving them the independence and the knowledge to move forward, it requires some extra effort and patience. Also, changing up tactics, I think, is important. And every kid is so different. The curiosity levels, the ebb and flow of curiosity, what they're curious in, I have to slow down, see them all as individual munchkins instead of my conglomerate brood of children, and give them a chance to explore independently. That also takes more time and more patience out of who I am, my personality, and my day. So I have to slow down to even give them a chance to be curious.
The fact is that we chose to be parents. Today's day and age, we choose to be a parent. So you walked into this knowing that this is something you wanted to do. Whether you fully understood it at the onset is another thing, right? But you chose to do this. So I think it is inherently our obligation to find opportunity for them to be better.
Yes, and I'm waiting for your book, Killing Curiosity or Raising Robots. We'll see when it comes out.
I think bottom line is, instead of thinking we have to parent this child, if we think about we're raising humans, it might help our perspective a bit.
Because the more you know, the more you realize you don't know, the more you have to learn.
Thanks for listening to Moms Unschooled.
Subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Facebook, or email us at momsunschooled@gmail.com. Choosy!